Welcome to Beyond the Bottom Line on the future of women's awakening, fulfillment and success with Letitia Cook of Women Up Limited and Didi Ananda Rashmika of Mujer Despierta.
Hello, this is Beyond the Bottom Line, a monthly exploration about women's awakening and fulfillment so that all women may reach their full potential, being their full feminine selves. Today, we're going to be talking about resilience. So, hi Didi, great to have you here with us again.
Happy to be here.
Tell me, how do you see resilience and how do you see that as being so important to women and really using our full potential?
I think resilience is an important quality to develop. It's not something we're necessarily born with. To develop in order to navigate through life in the way that we want, in a way that fulfills us to achieve what we want to achieve. Because surely when we want to achieve something great, be it for ourselves or for the world or for my family or for the company, whatever it may be, I need to be resilient in dealing with the ups and downs. I can't be thrown off my feet too often. Can't always avoid it, but not too often.
Yeah.
And I think resilience is major quality in dealing or navigating life and navigating life happily. Because it's not just a matter of tolerating stuff, but resilience in my vocabulary or in my understanding of it is something much more than we'll just get through it. No, it's growing stronger so that what is going around and what's happening doesn't affect you in the same way. Something like a tree with deep roots doesn't get blown away.
Yeah.
Doesn't get blown over.
Yes. Yeah.
I do have an English issue coming up very soon.
Your English is great, don't worry. So I know resilience, I think it's incredible how resilient we can actually be without even being aware of it. But I think also some people feel worried about a failure, or they really haven't done something right, or they're trying to avoid any kind of problems, things like that. Whereas actually, when you've got some setbacks, when you have to struggle, when you look back on something that hasn't worked out, you can learn such a lot from it.
Yeah.
Also, if you keep a positive mentality, then it doesn't matter really how bad you thought it was at the time. You really can get through it and use it to help yourself in the future. And what you learn from it can help you be successful, not necessarily material success, but whatever it is, it can really help you be successful because you've learned a way not to do something, but you've also learned a way how you yourself can manage problems, how you can look forward, and how you can stay positive. And I think that's very important. But also a lot of people say, oh, I can't stay positive, it's too difficult. But being positive is a choice. And the way you react, well, in my opinion, the way you react to something is your choice. You know, you can decide to be really upset and stressed and almost swamped by it or drowned by it.
Yeah.
Or you can choose to look for something positive within it, and just, you know, put your happy mind onto it and not your sad and stressed mind.
Someone told me it once in this way, said if you have to get from A to B, you can choose whether to drag your feet or to dance.
Yes, great. That is wonderful.
I always remember that. It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
But I think this thing of being positive, of course, optimism is a great quality and being positive and everything. But sometimes this idea of being positive, what I've seen is that yes, okay, I'm positive, but inside not really feeling it. It's good to cultivate it on a conscious level, like to change our thinking about it. But what I think is very helpful is to go one step deeper, which is part of self-development, spiritual development. No, like, because within us we have the source of everything.
Yep.
If I can connect to that source, I don't have to wake up thinking I'll be positive today, or I'll be kind today, or whatever it is.
Yep.
I am. So we need to nourish that from within, so that we don't change it only on the conscious level, like, but much deeper from inside. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because it is something we can cultivate, but sometimes when what happens a little bit sometimes, when now even more with social media and everything is positive, looking bright, right?
Yeah.
That we become ashamed of sometimes feeling defeated or negative, like what you mentioned earlier. Actually, you mentioned so many things, because this thing of feeling failure and therefore avoiding problem, that's the biggest obstacle to building resilience, in my opinion. Yeah. But because we have this whole thing, this whole culture of being positive and we have to achieve, and now everything is so visible because of social media, which before, when there was, well, even longer ago, when there was no internet, I mean, how many people were going to find out about it, right? Yeah. But we have to be positive, we have to be achieving and everything like this. And that nourishes this idea of shame for when you're not being positive, when you're not achieving. Yeah. Which then can paralyze people to take risks. Yes. And not only adults, but the children do the same. When they don't feel they can make mistakes, they'd rather not try. Yeah. And that stifles creativity, and it avoids the situations that can help you build resilience. Because what you said in the beginning, like, we are so much more resilient than we think we are. When we need to be, you'll be amazed how much you can tolerate. Yes. Right? And how much you can overcome. It's not something you necessarily choose to get into, but when we need to do something, you'll be amazed how much you can manage, right? Yeah. And this idea of struggling makes you stronger. In Tantra Yoga, struggle is the essence of life. But it's important to remember that this struggle is not suffering. Yes. Because the struggle is towards something greater, better, stronger you, right? Yeah. Suffering is more of a passive, something is happening to me and I can't handle it. Yeah. And it's an important thing, because sometimes in our upbringing, sometimes in our religious upbringing, there's a lot of emphasis on suffering and sin. Yeah. And we deserve to suffer because we're sinners. And because we did so many mistakes, and we did whatever, you know. Yeah. Whatever religion may have different versions of it, but generally, even in a different religion, if we still live in a country that's predominantly Christian, we get a lot of that sinner complex, right?
Oh, I know, it's awful.
Well, yeah, and the guilt complex on top of that, because it was our fault from the very beginning. Yeah. And living in other countries where not non-Christian societies, they don't have the same heavy guilt feeling.
That's
right?
Wonderful.
In fact, sometimes they're shameless about it. I've sometimes like, how can you? I don't know, but how you don't feel guilty? No, an alien concept. So it's not a suffering. It's not something that happens to us. It's not because of guilt we have to. No, a struggle is a positive effort towards something better, towards becoming stronger. I mean, think of the example of someone who's in the gym, you know, on the bench pushing weights.
Yes.
Why is he doing that? She doing that? Why is she doing that? Not because those weights have to go 10 centimeters up, or how much is it? 30 centimeters, half a meter up. I mean, it's in order to train those muscles to become stronger. Yeah. And it is a struggle. But so the purpose is to become stronger. In the same way, when we struggle, we become stronger. The problem is when we don't see the results immediately. Which, for example, I teach meditation, and when you've meditated or you've tried to meditate, you know that your mind is a mad monkey, stung by a scorpion, drunk, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So people struggle with concentration, and then they say, look, nothing is changing. And I always tell the same metaphor, that if you're on a road, mountain road, and there's a big rock on the road, and you can't pass until you move that rock, right?
Yeah.
And you're pushing and you're pushing with all your might, and still the rock doesn't move. It looked like nothing has happened, but in the meantime, your muscles have become stronger.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So the struggle is like that. We may or may not see the results. When we see the results, we get encouraged, and and then we continue. But it's important that even when you don't see the results yet, you are becoming stronger in the process, and it's never a straight line up.
Yes.
So it's important not to have an aversion to that kind of struggle.
Yeah. And would you say that you can develop more resilience by actively looking for struggles like that, or on the way that you approach the setbacks that you have? So how do you think people can develop resilience the best, and how can they use their setbacks in a positive, well, not in a positive, in a helpful way?
In a useful way.
I'm not going to use the word positive.
I would not necessarily say that we have to go and search for difficulties. Mm-hmm. Generally, there's plenty, but we might have put many under the carpet. Mm-hmm. Generally, we have enough in our on our path to handle, because actually life works that way. We get put on our path what we need to overcome. Yeah. And I can avoid it 1, 2, 3 times, but if I'm not going to deal with it now, it will still keep coming back to me, right? Yeah. Because it's something that I need to learn in my evolution. Yeah. Okay, in my process of becoming perfect, right? Or my self-realization, whatever you want to call it. Even the most non-airy-fairy way to become the best version of me.
Yes.
So if that's something I need to learn, but I think it's important to think, to see what's under the carpet. What have I been putting under the carpet? Have I been putting off a situation? Maybe I have to talk to some family members about something that has really been bothering me. But instead of dealing with it, I just pretend nothing happened. And, we see each other with Christmas and whatever other occasions, and we just say hi, but inside it's all dark feelings about this person, this situation, whatever it is. Yeah. Why not confront that situation? That's just an example that came to mind, but I think in the same way, there are things that we've been avoiding. Maybe we've been avoiding talking to someone or dealing with a situation at work. Because generally we're really good at avoiding. Yes. Avoiding confrontations, because it will be a very unpleasant process. And it may be, and you may not be able to resolve it, but knowing that you have done your best, and that you've been honest about it, you've been sincere with yourself, and you're not, it's not about your ego trip, but you've been sincerely, for the welfare of you, the other person, the situation, been trying to resolve it. That's the game. No?
Yeah. And do you think that our age comes into it at all, or do you think gender comes into it at all? So are women more or less or equally resilient as men, and are young people better than older people, or older better than younger, or do you think that's all totally irrelevant?
Starting with the age, after the gender, I think it depends a lot on the attitude kids are growing up with, mm-hmm. and what they have gone through. Sometimes you see teenagers, they're extremely mature and resilient because of what they have gone through and how they have grown in the process. Yes. And sometimes we see adults that are still living even irresponsibly, right? Yeah. So I don't think age, in the sense, it depends on the life path more than on the years.
Yeah.
right? Now, in terms of gender, I recently came across something very interesting, because when we talk about resilience, we're talking about dealing with stress, right?
Yeah.
And until I think 20 years ago, the idea was that there's two ways to respond to stress: fight or flight.
Yeah.
Right? The two usual responses.
Yeah.
What it turned out that all that research was based mostly on men. I think something like 17% of the people researched were women. 17.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. When you start reading these things, sometimes I don't know if, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. So 20 years ago, a woman decided to research, the full picture.
Yeah.
And she found there is another way to deal with stress that women do.
Yeah.
And it's called tend and befriend.
Really? Yes.
Yes. It's extremely interesting. And basically, you see, from the perspective of when we were still living in caves or in tribes, not in our current situation, men maybe could fight or flight, but women who would have the responsibility for the family, they couldn't just run.
Yeah.
Right? So there's another way to reach out and resolve in a different way.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it and I reflected on my experiences, I was trying to see if I could relate to some of that. And I could. I found examples where I didn't necessarily want to fight or flight. I was trying to approach that person or the group of people, trying to come to a different kind of resolution. And it makes perfect sense to me in the psychology of women, because more feminine quality, and I'm using these words masculine and feminine doesn't mean that only women have feminine qualities, only men have male qualities, masculine qualities, but it's a more feminine quality to search for cooperation. It's more relational. Yes, relational. It's more the process, it's more the cycle, the cooperative part of it, right? And in that image, this idea of tend and befriend makes perfect sense. And recently, I'll give you an example. With a woman who'd never heard of this kind of research, obviously. She is Argentinian. I met her recently. And she told me when she started working in a particular job, she found out she was the first woman in the company, because before, the previous boss, previous owner, did not want any women in the company. Now his son took over and he wanted to change things. So she was the first woman hired. She said the first weeks, every night I came home crying. And after a few weeks, I decided I either have to change something or I have to leave if I want to live.
Yeah.
Right? And we're talking about maybe 20 years ago in Argentina, which has a certain amount of macho culture.
Yes.
And then she observed who was the ringleader in what was going on in the office. The kind of teasing, the comments, the attitude, everything.
Yeah.
And she found who was kind of the leader. And then she found out that very soon it was his birthday.
Yes.
And most of these men, and this man included, thought women's place was in the kitchen, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And to serve them, obviously.
Yeah.
What she did, it amazed me. What she did, she made him a birthday cake.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
She said they relate to women in terms of food and being served.
Yes.
If that's what they will see, I can do that part too.
Yeah.
So they cannot deny that she's a woman.
Yeah.
And so she did that. And of course he was blown away. He could never expect that, because I'm sure in some part of their conscious they're aware of what they're doing, right? But they possibly didn't know any other way to relate to women either.
Yes.
Because many times he said, we have to remember that even someone who behaves in a non-empowering way, like this man in her office, he probably didn't know any other way to deal with women.
Yes.
And he wasn't being very resourceful in finding out, perhaps, whatever. It's not an excuse, but it's a reason to help understand, why he's doing like that. it broke the ice. And he said, we were still not best friends, but it changed everything. And actually after that, every time it was someone's birthday, they would put some money together and go out for lunch together. So she changed something in the company culture. But just this act, I mean, who would have thought of reaching out to someone who's been bothering you at work?
Yeah.
With a loving gesture, saying, look, you know?
Yeah.
So this for me was like an example of this stand and befriend.
Yeah, exactly.
So I do think there is differences in gender on how we deal with certain stressful situations, certain challenges.
Yeah.
And there's another way in which I've noticed a difference in terms of dealing with, in terms of resilience, which someone shared with me who's been involved in a lot of relief work.
Yeah.
Right? Straight after a natural disaster, the men jump in and do the initial work, very, with full energy and everything like this. But they don't necessarily last a long time.
Yes.
While women, they have maybe a slightly lower pace, but in the long run, they continue much more. I mean, they continue in the long run.
They have the stamina.
They have the stamina.
So they're running the marathon, whereas the men are doing the sprint.
Right. And I thought that was an interesting concept. And it's not to say one is better than the other, but it's again another way in which we can see how we can be complementary.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think it's very interesting because I don't know where it comes from, but whenever I think of resilience, I think of women. It just, to me, and I'm not trying to be gender biased, but it's just a sort of instinctively in my head.
Yeah.
I just think of women as being more resilient than men, and more capable of weathering problems in a less injured way, or managing better with the problems that are around them. And I don't know whether it's, as you mentioned earlier, maybe it's to do with, we bring up children, we have to care for the people, or we normally care for the people around us. We think about a more global view of it and about what's happening to people around us. So maybe that gives us an extra vision or an extra range. But all of the people I know who've had problems or who've had things to overcome, the majority I've seen who've done it with the greatest success and the lesser amount of stress. I wouldn't say no stress, because there's definitely stress, but they seem to manage it more completely. And it always seems to be women that manage to do it. It's almost like we have, maybe it's our sixth sense, that's developed in a different way, but we seem to have an extra skill that lets us manage things more easily. So
there is something, I think it has something to do with this idea of the cooperation, the building a base,
Yes.
Which requires a certain kind of quality of resilience, which is, and if that's in our nature to do that, there are certainly differences.
Yes. Yeah. And so, do you have anything that you would advise, or any tips or strategies for people that are really struggling? And I don't mean some really catastrophic struggle, it can be a small thing as well, but something that they're being distracted by, that's irritating them, or it's just eating away and they're fed up with it and they want to turn the page or move on or find a different way out, and feel more optimistic about what's going to happen and less stressed. Do you have any ways of helping this? So basically,